Hey everyone, this is Erica with Crafts Direct, and we just got in a really fun new product. It's called the Scorch Marker, and it is a really safe, fun alternative to a wood burning tool. Join me as I play with the Scorch Marker for the first time. The first thing we're going to do is use the Scorch Marker with a piece of wood and a vinyl stencil. So we're going to start by applying the vinyl to the board. So we're going to take the vinyl, rub the back of it, peel the backing off, flip the vinyl stencil over, and then stick it to the board. Then we're going to rub that vinyl stencil down and slowly peel off that transfer paper. Once we've got the transfer paper off the board, we are going to run our fingers over the vinyl just to make sure everything's secure. Then we get to play with the Scorch Marker. The directions say to shake it first, so here I am doing that. And then this has two different tips. It has a foam brush tip and a bullet tip. And we're going to start out with trying the foam brush tip. All you have to do with the foam brush tip is take the foam brush out of the Scorch Marker and apply the foam brush by brushing it onto the piece of wood. And we're just making sure to stay inside the stencil for this. This worked really well. The liquid that comes out is red. That was kind of a surprise to me. I didn't know that was going to happen. But overall, the foam brush part worked really nicely. I definitely want to try out the other side, so I flipped it over to the bullet tip side. The directions say to push down on the pen. Basically, this is like a marker at this point, and you want to push it down until that red liquid starts flowing, and then you're just coloring like you use a marker. Once I finished coloring the inside, I decided to go around the outside border so that I would be burning a shape of Minnesota into the board as well. So I just used that foam brush since I thought it would be a little bit more consistent of a width of a line, and traced around the Minnesota shape. Eventually I wanted to see how the bullet tip would work in doing this, so I switched over to the bullet tip, and that worked just as nicely. And at this point I'm kind of falling in love with using the bullet tip over the foam brush. It just seems like the liquid flows out of it a little bit nicer. Here I am just going over a second time over all of my lines and letters. I just wanted to make sure this was going to work right, but really I didn't know what I was doing, so I was just hoping it was going to work out in the end. Once I had all of my letters colored in, I got to remove that vinyl stencil. This is important. We definitely want to remove the vinyl stencil, otherwise the heat tools are going to melt it and a sticky surface is going to appear on your board. So finally I got to try out the wood burning part. So I took my embossing gun and I spent a good 30 seconds because I am impatient and tried really hard to get this to burn. But it turns out my embossing gun wasn't warm enough. It didn't give off enough heat to activate that liquid. So eventually I busted out the big guns, I took my big heat tool, and after 10 seconds of using this I could see a total difference. So I definitely recommend using a bigger heat gun instead of an embossing gun. So when you're using your heat gun, just make sure to constantly be moving the heat gun. If you leave it in one spot too long, it's going to scorch more of the background than you want. You can see it scorching a little bit of the background here, but not that much, and since I'm moving consistently, it's also doing that consistently. So it's not going to give you a big circle burn mark, it's just going to give you an even tone. So here I just went over the whole thing until everything turned from that red color to a burned color. Next up, I wanted to try using a different type of stencil and a different surface. So here I have one of those thick plastic stencils and an MDF surface. So with the stencil, you definitely want to tape the stencil to the surface that you're using just so it doesn't move around. And then you're going to start applying the Scorch Marker. Again, make sure to shake, and then just pick whichever side you want to use and start applying it to the stencil. So I started out with the foam brush. I had a thought that maybe this was going to apply too much of that liquid and that it would end up a little blurry, but I wanted to give it a try just so we could see how it would turn out. So I'm applying it. You can definitely see there is more liquid on there than I probably normally would like, and I have a hunch that it is going to turn out a little bit more blurred. So then on the next feather, I decided to switch it from the foam brush tip over to the bullet tip. And I definitely felt like I had more control as I was going over it. It seemed to apply the liquid a little bit more consistently. So that's what I used for the next two feathers. Once we've got all those feathers colored in, we are going to remove that stencil. And I just want to point out, you can see on my table that there's a little bit of discoloration. That's from my previous project where there was a crack in the board. So definitely don't use your best table to do this on. Here you see me using the heat gun tool again until everything gets nice and dark. And then I noticed some of my spots didn't turn out very well, so I went back in with my marker just seeing if this would work. So I fixed the little spots, went back over with my heat gun, and it seemed to work. And obviously I couldn't just leave it there. I wanted to see what it would look like on the sides of the board. So first I started with that foam brush tip. I just am not in love with that side. I switched it over to the bullet tip, colored in the edges of the board, and then I started using my heat gun. And you can see at first, this isn't sped up at all. I was going way too fast. You need to slow down a little bit when you are using the heat gun. Get a little bit closer, and once I did that, you could see results. So make sure to get close to the board and go nice and slow, but still move. And then here, I definitely sped it up until I went all the way around the surface. And then lastly, I wanted to try handwriting. So I used my bullet tip, wrote the words, "Be brave," went over it twice with a Scorch marker just to make sure that it would do something, took out the heat gun tool, and it definitely worked. So handwriting works as well. The last thing we're going to try is that same stencil but with a chipboard notebook. I just wanted to see what it would do. You can definitely see there are lots of pages to this. I was a little bit afraid it was going to burn, but it didn't. So again, I took my same plastic stencil, taped it down to the notebook, and then I went in with my Scorch marker and colored in those feathers. Again, make sure to shake and then start applying the Scorch marker. It wasn't coloring very dark like the other woods had, so I was a little bit worried about it, but in the end it definitely worked. So once you are done coloring in your stencil, you are going to take the stencil off and then use your heat gun. This one definitely worked a lot faster for me. It turned out really nice, but I wanted to show you, since the stencil was so fun, just a little thing you could do to jazz it up a little bit. So here I applied the second part of the stencil to my notebook. I took some distressed ink and a blender brush and I rubbed some ink over the top to give a little extra detail to those feathers. When I'm using the blender brush, I'm just going in circles to brush on the distressed ink. You'll peel off the stencil, and then you'll see the fun design it added to my feathers. And then I just took it one more step and added some paper along the bottom. I definitely had fun trying out this new product. I hope you had fun watching me as I went along and did it. If you're interested in purchasing the Scorch marker, you can go to craftstrek.com and go to our projects page, and the Scorch marker will be linked up with this project.